So welcome everybody to the first ever Boulder Green Forum. It's actually the third ever Green Forum we've held, but the other two were in Denver. And by the way, silence your cell phones now while we're thinking about it. So yeah, here at Niche Workspaces, my name is Michael Davies, and I'll be your moderator for the evening. Before we introduce our panelists, I would like to thank all of you for coming out tonight and keeping the sustainability conversation alive. I'd also like to thank our volunteers who donated their time tonight. Lastly, I'd like to thank our green sponsors for helping out, for helping make this event possible. So let's give it up for those people. So, all right, without further ado, let's introduce tonight's panel. So our first panelist is the Chief Sustainability Officer for the University of Colorado Boulder and formerly the Director of External Affairs for the U.S. Department of Energy, a position appointed by President Obama. She was a senior advisor on climate change and energy for Colorado Governor Bill Ritter, during which she oversaw creation of the state's first climate action plan. Please welcome Heidi VanGenderen. And steal whatever seat you would like.
Oh my goodness, water's already here.
Yep.
Would someone like some?
So our next panelist is the founder of Americas for Conservation in the Arts, the America's Latino Eco Festival, Mandel Vilar Press, United Cultures for Arts and Nature Youth Ambassadors, and the Latina Environmental Giving Circle. By the way, everybody on this panel is an overachiever. She serves on the Advisory Council of the Colorado Office of Outdoor Recreation Industry and is on the board of the Latino Alliance for Literacy Advancement. Please welcome Irene Vilar. Our next panelist is the Chief Financial Officer for Snooze and AM Eatery. Snooze is a gold level member of the Environmental Leadership Program as well as a certifiably Green Denver and Climate-Wise company. He was also the CFO for Noodles and Company, correct?
VP of Finance.
VP of Finance for Noodles and Company and Bloomin' Brands. Please welcome Bill Long. And our final panelist is the owner and founder of B0, a nonprofit zero-waste education organization, again, right here in Boulder. She was featured in a TEDx Aruba talk titled, "What If We All Made Less Trash?" She provides daily inspiration via her Instagram account, B0WasteGirl, which I love saying, now has over 45,000 followers and counting. So she's an Instagram star. Please welcome Andrea Sanders. All right, so we're going to go ahead and dive right in here. I'll start with a question for all of you, and we don't have mics tonight, so everybody will project nice and loud, just like theater class. So what initially, and Heidi, I'll start with you, got you interested in sustainability and ultimately led you to where you are now?
I just want to say we're not overachievers. Some of us have just been around for a long time. Just going on record. What caused me, you know, it's a family mystery certainly, because everybody in my family is either a lawyer or a journalist, and they're like, what do you do? My great-grandfather, I'm a fourth generation Colorado native, gave birth to a fifth generation, just as we were talking about where we're from. And my great-granddad was an oil and gas attorney who believed that oil shale on the western slope ought to be exploited. And when you listen to the language in the energy economy, there's some pretty interesting words. Exploitation to extinction being one aim, which is kind of an odd thought. He also was the he was the commissioner of parks underneath Mayor Spear. So way back, he came out to Colorado in 1867, I believe, from having read the law in Michigan. And there was an oligarchy of white men who pretty much ran everything, right? And great-granddad was one of those guys. And as Commissioner of Parks, he forged the Denver Mountain Park system, and he was responsible for the parkways and parks that you visit in Denver, Colorado. And I've always said that my pursuit of sustainable human use of natural resources of all types and the interface of we, the human species, with this remarkably complex ecosystem that literally sustains all life everywhere is genetic. That I must have, something came down, and I think back to what I've done, and it's just always been, I've been very, very fortunate to pursue my passion in the work that I do, and have just always had that as an aim, and it's been a great gift.
Irene, I'm going to pass the question on to you. What initially got you interested in sustainability and ultimately led you to where you are now?
Ay, ay, ay. I say that because, you know, I could tell you the answer in a linear form that I think would not be as authentic as telling you that I really don't know when that happened. I do know that I grew up in Puerto Rico my first 8 years of my life in the most polluted town in the Western Hemisphere, at least for those 12 years of, in the 1970s and early 80s. We held the largest pharmaceutical industrial complex in the world within a 3-mile radius. I know what not being able to breathe or drink water for days in your own house means. I know what it's, you know, to go to the hospital multiple times with stomach, you know, parasites and all weird things, all kinds of ailments, which at the time, as a child, I never attributed to the environment. I didn't have a relationship to, I mean, for me, the environment was just was my life. You know, it was playing with lizards outside every day and cutting their tails and, you know, and playing with the rain that I thought was rain every day at 4:30, which I felt that the rain was such a responsible entity. But really, later on, I found out it was airplanes, you know, spraying the cane fields around my house, and wow. I would play in that rain. I mean, but how did that crystallize within my becoming to determine that this was the moment I became a sustainable, you know, I mean, I don't want to talk about sustainability, I want to talk about environmental justice. And then from there, maybe we circle back to principles of sustainability. I think that will give the conversation more urgency. So, yeah, I come from a context also, I mean, I could go this way, but I think that you, talking about your grandfather, totally realigned my brain. You made me think of my grandmother. I grew up in the fact that we can come from these radically different grandparents, and yet, in your case, you are the opposite of your grandfather. And I mean, in some ways, in some, I mean, at least in terms of sustainability, in oil and gas positions as you're presenting them. And with me, my grandmother, she was a Puerto Rican revolutionary, independent, nationalist fighter, and ended up in jail for 28 years in a woman prison in the US until President Carter gave her presidential pardon in 1978 before he left, 1977. But her whole work was about cultural preservation and about national survival and preservation. How did witnessing that influence my passion for environmental preservation? It's like, I'm not sure, but maybe I'll write a book about it one day. But I just wanted to give you some ideas of the biographical anchor points that may have influenced my becoming today. To tell you the truth, what made me decide to stop writing books and take these full force, it happened when I became a mother within that first year and a half.
Yeah, and you say, maybe you'll write a book about it, and I want everybody to know that you're probably serious about that, because as I mentioned, you own Vilar Press, so that probably will hit the shelves one day. So, Bill, I'll go ahead and
sure.
Ask you that.
I wish you'd asked me first. I don't think my story is nearly as impressive as the two we just heard. You know, I was lucky to grow up in a generation where I think during my formative years, recycling, composting, sustainability, these types of things were becoming much more a part of the national conversation in the United States. And so for me, this has always been something that I've been, I would say, probably more casually interested in terms of my own personal life, you know, as a resident. In terms of how I recycled, how I composted, the things that I did, and we approached it from a we'll do what we can type of approach. I think what really clicked for me was actually when I started working for Snooze a year ago and began working with a company that was in this mainstream industry, this incredibly wasteful industry, and being able to see the impact that we were able to have within the industry in terms of the efforts that were already being made within the company to be an incredibly socially conscious and environmentally conscious organization. And it's been a great journey for me over the last year with Snooze to really connect with how we've approached these sorts of issues and see that it's something that can be really driven forward in a business that is for profit and doing very well, and also doing well by its employees and doing well by the environment. So that's been a really powerful thing for me.
Great. And Andrea, same to you. What initially got you interested in sustainability, and ultimately where you are now?
So I grew up in Florida. I wasn't born there, I was born upstate New York, but I grew up on the Gulf Coast of Florida. And ever since I was a young girl, as far as I can remember, I've always been really interested in, flies, trees, bugs. We grew up on the Gulf Coast, so I spent so much time in the water, exploring, being on the beach all day long, as much as I can remember. And I started volunteering at a local marine research center called Moat Marine Laboratory. And I started volunteering there when I was 14. So I started teaching the public then, and I went and did that all through, middle school, all through high school. That was my social world in high school. I was on the marine mammal care team there, so we took care of injured marine whales, dolphins, whatever was stranded. And so I've always had this connection with and teaching people about, the amazingness of our planet. And it wasn't until I was working at another, I was working at the Central Florida Zoological Park, and I was an education teacher there for 5 years. And so I spent all my time teaching people about saving the whales or saving leopards or whatever. But then when I got home, I didn't really do anything extraordinarily different. I didn't care about what I ate or what I put on my body or how much I filled the trash can up. There was no connection. And I found a blog, it was back in 2007, called Zero Waste Home, and a woman named Bea Johnson. And she started a blog around that time where she documented her journey of making less landfill waste. So she had, at the time, 2 young boys, a husband, and herself, and all their landfill waste fit in a mason, a little mason jar this size, for the whole year. And I was like, oh, what is this? It was the first time I had connected, the stuff that I do on a daily basis with the work that I've always been passionate about since I was 14. And it was in that moment that I saw that this was just an extension. This was building different relationships between myself, the food I eat, the clothes I wear, the communities I live in, where things come from, where they really go. And that kind of just started that journey for me. So I did that kind of quietly on my own, paring down my trash. I taught meditation and yoga during that time after I kind of stopped working in the zoological marine fields. And then people just started becoming, my friends would come over to the house and we didn't have a trash can anymore. And they're like, what's going on? and I remember spending one afternoon with one of my friends, and she just wanted to see it all, and so I showed her everything. And I realized I should use my background in environmental education and teach people how to make less trash. And that's how B0 came about. It started kind of as a little, here's what I'm doing, and then I turned it into a nonprofit. We've been a nonprofit for just over a year. We have over 70 ambassadors right now. They're all around the U.S., and we have about 12 internationally, from Kuwait to Bangalore. And so now really what we do is just teach people how to build relationships between the things that we use and the environment. It's really about putting value back into things.
So we'll get a little bit more, time permitting, into the B0s kind of around the world.
Cool.
So yeah, the ambassadors around the world. But Irene, I'm going to come back to you, and I know that you have a ton of organizations that you work with and lead. But firstly, talk about Americas for Conservation in the Arts and the mission of this organization.
So Americas for Conservation in the Arts, it's not different organizations. These are all programs from the same organization.
Okay.
So Americas for Conservation in the Arts is a Colorado environmental nonprofit that committed to advancing a diverse environmental movement and engaging mainly the brown communities of the country in the conversation. And we do it through different programs. So we have a publishing press that is about publishing books, advancing diversity and conservation in publishing. So the whole idea of biodiversity, of peoples and places. We used to call that ethnic studies before when we were talking about people's diversities. But it's like a lot of these concepts are so anchored already in the past. Now that we have so many, environmental urgencies, going on suddenly, so this is an attempt of anchoring that biodiversity, not in ethnic studies, but in the environment, so kind of shifting the conversation. And that's part of Mandel Vilar Press. And then we also have an annual sort of incubator gathering of Latino American environmental minds and brown leadership in general, coming from different sectors, and sort of rounding that meetup of the minds in arts and culture. Sort of emphasizing the reality that is not spoken of much, that arts are really a privileged way to advance sustainability and awareness, environmental awareness. So that's what the festival does. And then we have a bunch of other initiatives. But yeah, that's Americas for Conservation of the Arts, one organization with 7 initiatives. My marketing director is like, I don't have a director. He's an intern, a volunteer.
He wants to be a director. Have at it.
Yeah, we're all non-paid, including me, the founder. But yeah, he's a director. Talent-wise and everything else. The last time I sent him the proposal for our new program called Journey for Climate Change. I can't even keep up. And I said, I need a logo, I need a banner, I need this is the vision. And so he didn't say anything. Next day he sends me the logo, it's beautiful food and everything. And instead of saying an initiative of Americas for Conservation in the Arts, which is the tagline in all of our, he says another initiative. That was his passive-aggressive way of saying stop.
That's hilarious.
So real quick, I just want to follow up, and you mentioned there that you wanted to talk about environmental justice, and I'm assuming this is something you're very passionate about, obviously. But one of the core values of Americas for Conservation in the Art is, and this is on the website, equality, environmental justice, and inclusiveness. So why draw the connection between environmental justice and inclusiveness, especially under the umbrella of equality? How are those things all related?
You've mixed it all up, which is how it should be. But let me see how I answer without mixing it up. Justice. Now we circle back to the first question, which was how I came to sustainability. I think I came to sustainability through justice, concerns about justice in my body, in the people around me that had been sick and impacted. And then there has been huge parenthesis in my growth as a person, so that I ended up spending the least time dealing with these issues. But justice and equality, I think, let me just say it in numbers. Of the 200, Latinos make the majority of 200 metropolitan districts in this nation. Of the 59 plus Latinos in this country, half of them live in the 15 cities, the top 15 cities in ground level ozone pollution. Denver being one of them. Commerce City, where I was yesterday, talking to the Commission on Air Quality against, permitting Suncor to keep sending emissions into the air.
like Globeville and all those places.
Yes, those places of Commerce City and Globeville and how you say Ancia and Ancia? What is that other?
Elyria. Swansea.
Swansea, right.
Yeah, Swansea.
So those are 64, 68, and 70%, Latino. So Denver is one of those 15 cities in that most polluted zip code of the entire nation, which is that zip code, 80216. We are Latinos, the majority there. It is our kids going to the hospitals, 3 times more often than other kids. And 70% more dying of an asthma attack than other kids. So, and then look at the people that feed us, our farmers, are 68% Latinos. The people that shelter us, 1/3 of them are Hispanic. And between all of them, they make up 78% of deaths from extreme heat. And the statistics go on and on. Of course, we have to be at the table in these conversations, and we're not, because even though this country has been 40% brown for over 27 years, and 32% in STEM professions, only 11% of us are in green organizations and in the boards of green, of corporations dealing in the sustainability and diversity, realms, and in the greens entities of the government like USDA and Department of Interior who manage our natural resources. We're 11% there. So, I could go on and on, but I think these numbers tells you why it is about justice, equality, and environmental justice. Mm-hmm.
Right, yeah. Heidi, I'm going to shift it over to you. And part of your, and excuse me if this is dry, but part of your job description says that you are tasked with leading the creation of CU Boulder's strategic sustainability vision. What are you currently working on to create and execute this vision?
I am, I think, 8 weeks into this job. So
that's why I said working on.
I just want to go on record that those are some remarkable numbers. Actually, I'm reeling. I've learned so much from you already this evening in terms of in my absence. I've been back in DC for the last 8 years, and while I was gone, you guys allowed oil and gas to go to the top of the list on what the economic contributor is to the state. What? How did that happen?
Not on my watch.
Because we're not at the table.
Yeah.
He's working on it.
I'm trying.
You are, and the transformation is underway, and that brings us to the University of Colorado Boulder. So, again, for me personally, this platform is just a wonderful capstone in my career. Now that I'm a grandmother, it's like, okay, what are we going to do to finish this one out? But still, and feed the retirement fund. The University of Colorado Boulder has a long, strong history of sustainable actions. It's the first campus in the country to have instituted a recycling program. And the students 41 years ago went to the administration and said, man, we think we need to pay attention to our waste stream and how, and we can talk about recycling as no panacea and how we really need to think about where things go. What are you doing when you throw something away? Where's away? And that has been, I've been working on this stuff for over 30 years, and I can tell you the roller coaster of focus on the issues has been just that, and it's amazing what comes and goes, including the very, very important aspect of sustainability, which is social justice and equity. The university's students got turned down by the administration 41 years ago. They said, all right, fine, turned around and taxed themselves to start the first recycling program of any major university in the country.
That's awesome.
There you go.
Idea.
And yeah, wow. And the really what attracted me to this job was the fact that it is a platform of students, and I look out at all of you and know that it's your generation and below that are inheriting all that we face. And we have had a remarkable period of prosperity that is so uneven in its application, but really this 175 year-long fossil fuel feast has a lot of consequences. So as we look at the sustainability vision for the university, there's a lot of great work underway. My new boss is fond of saying that there are many cylinders of excellence around the campus. We're not a particularly adept species at genuine collaboration. And part of what I've been doing is meeting with as many people as I can in all sectors of the university, so faculty, staff, administration, and the students have not yet come back in force. I can't imagine. I'm a cyclist, and I've already been almost run over like 3-4 times, and nobody's even on campus yet. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what's this? You know, there are 32,000 students that are going to be coming back in about 3 weeks, and I'm okay. I digress. More than you wish to know. The charge that I have is actually, I think of it kind of as herding cats. We're going to be organizing a sustainability council that will importantly include external stakeholders as well. So the University of Colorado in this town, and we lived in Boulder a long time ago when our kids were little and moved to Denver first and then to DC, and it's kind of shocking to come back to Boulder and realize what not a very diverse community looks like. It's no slam, it's just who we are. And you know, you're sitting next to me, right? I mean, here I am, accident of birth. You know, I once was blonde, so think blonde, blue-eyed, you know, white person. We don't have a huge amount of diversity on campus, and I think that's one thing the university struggles with, truthfully, in who it is. But now 10% of our 32,000 students are international, and the global reality of the world that we face means that the sustainability vision absolutely needs to connect to institutions, educational institutions, the private sector to be sure, all governmental levels, literally do that internationally, so that we build a campus that is sustainable in all functions. It has a curriculum that matches its talk and its walk, and you know, we're one of the premier research institutions in climate science, with 12 federal labs that are right around, and you know, that's going right to the heart of the matter. And looking then to put together a comprehensive sustainability plan that'll have many, many subparts, but that document will hopefully be a living document that sets out really strong goals and aims to become literally as sustainable in all aspects as we can possibly be. So that's transportation, land use, water, food production. You know, for me, I've been working primarily on energy and climate change, but this is an opportunity to really blast it out into the full spectrum. And the materials economy, the supply chain, there are just so many aspects to this, and I sense that the audience here knows most of it. So come on in and help. That's what my invitation.
So quick follow-up question,
Yeah.
and it's a little off script, but it's, and you can answer it, because I know that you said you've been there for about 8 weeks now.
But who's counting?
Do you foresee, because you mentioned, you know, we're not really collaborative, at least to some extent by nature. Are there some internal battles you foresee fighting within CU? I know they're kind of based on driving by. I don't go to CU, but based on driving by, they're kind of developing right now. They're in development mode, probably ever expanding if they're like my school, UCF. And then, you know, you walk in and very nice gym, great facilities, but, you know, it is all brand new equipment, which isn't exactly the most sustainable thing to be doing. I mean, do you foresee a lot of internal battles taking place, or are you just kind of taking, you know, more of an approach of compromising? And
I'm going to assume no major battles from the outset and take them as they come if they arise. I think that the university is actually quite unified. We're at an inflection point, and it's pretty interesting. There's a lot of new leadership that's been brought in. My position never existed before, as one example. The vice chancellors, there are multiple new deans that are really have this aim for the university to become literally a national and international leader in innovation. And when I heard that, I was like, I got an arena for you in which to innovate, if ever there was one. So I think that your question more is one of, it's a political consideration. And the politics of sustainability have foiled us consistently. Colorado is a very interesting state. The leadership of the university is very interesting in that there are some seriously conservative elements in the president, in the Board of Regents. Mm-hmm. The question, from my perspective, is how you build a winning argument in a political sense. And my own approach, and it's probably, you know, as one ages, one is known to become a little less inclined to be radical, but I do think that we all face the question of how we politically organize ourselves now to have these issues come forward and to have what we know needs to be done prevail. For the leadership at the university, making the business case is, I think, going to be primarily a winning strategy, and it's not one that I disagree with. And it, you know, when I worked for the governor of Colorado under Bill Ritter, it was interesting. We constantly had the conversation before we went into a meeting: do you lead with human contribution to climate change? In this state, you shut a lot of people down. You know, you're going to go in, you talk to them, and if you start with climate change, they're just going to, you lose it from the get-go. Rather than Bill Ritter's strategy, he got elected governor as on the platform of a new energy economy. The new energy economy that's rapidly coming forward at long last. And necessarily, you know, it had to happen for a variety of reasons. He would not hesitate at the end of a meeting, no matter who we were meeting with, you know, an oil and gas CEO, a utility leader who was quite conservative. He wouldn't hesitate at the end of that to say, you know what, you need to know something about me personally, and that is, I've learned a lot about energy and climate change in the course of running for governor and becoming governor. I believe the science, I recognize the science. I have 4 children. I am doing this because of climate change. Thanks so much for coming in. Please.
Wow.
I love it. Yeah. You remind me of Elizabeth Warren. Have they told you that before? You know Elizabeth, don't you think? She's
so great.
I think it's interesting what both of you are saying. It's all about inclusiveness. And the interesting thing about sustainability is that there are a lot of people who want a seat at the table. There's a lot of people who want a seat at the table with a condition, you know, especially like conditionally, like fossil fuels. I think everybody believes in the science. Whether or not they admit they believe is a different story. So it's definitely interesting how sustainability is bringing different groups together, and definitely some compromises that have to be involved for this to sort of take off, which we'll get there. But Andrea, I'm going to swing this over to you. So she had mentioned, you know, waste on campus and also just in general, and what does it mean to throw something away? Where does it go? I'll ask you, what are some of the most common ways people create waste daily, and how can they avoid these waste creating habits?
I mean, the most common is we are just a plastic society. And I mean, if you go home tonight and look at your trash can, if we have a trash can, if you have a jar, trash jar, it's usually single-use disposables. I mean, you can probably name a bunch right now. Water bottles or plastic razor blades or, or something like that. You know, you go to any grocery store, everything is packaged, overly packaged. I mean, one time when I first started this, I had ordered something online, and it was like a small thing. And it came in this ginormous box with tons of bubble wrap. And I'm like, this is like a cloth item. You know, and the thing is, we misuse materials. And the most thing we misuse is plastics. And we weren't always like this. I mean, just a few decades ago, we didn't have this amount of single-use convenience items. I mean, my grandparents didn't, and it wasn't, plastic water bottles weren't even popular until the mid-'80s. So, yeah, it's single-use plastics by far. That's like number one.
In 1947, 100% of the beverage containers in this country were glass.
They're glass, yeah.
The average container had 100 trips before it was recycled. And then World War II came along, post-World War II, the prosperity, as Lester Brown says, of cheap fossil fuels, auto-centered, disposable society.
Yeah.
That's what we became.
Disposables were a big thing, especially they came out in the 1950s. You're gonna ask me that, yeah. Yeah, convenient stuff, and a lot. But the funny thing is that it wasn't something we just like all like, oh, cool, yeah, we'll throw something out. That was not something people. You didn't just buy something with your hard-earned money, take it home, use it once, and throw it away. Like that was just considered stupid to do that. It was. Your clothing, you didn't have. There's no time in human history that we have this much access to textiles for so cheap. You had a few clothes, maybe 30 pieces, and those lasted you for a long time. You knew how to mend. We were resourceful. We were thrifty. We were community centered, and it took a little bit of time for us to kind of, catch on. Like, ooh, I can just like use this cup and throw it away. I have to do the dishes. This is great. But it took a while for us to like really like do that as a culture, American culture.
So, Bill, I had another first question for you, but I think this one's maybe a little more appropriate.
Sure.
How challenging is it at Snooze in particular to offer an affordable product that's organically or locally sourced versus like, the Outback method of, mass production, that sort of thing?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot wrapped up in that question. We are in a very highly competitive industry. That is one of the lowest profit per employee industries in the entire country. And so because of that, our commitments to our sourcing standards and our commitments to our waste stream diversion cost us a lot more than it would cost any of our competitors to be out there operating. And so unfortunately, the consumer and the guest that walks through our doors doesn't necessarily give full consideration to what the costs are for all of the things that we're doing. And I saw a study recently that was directly related to the $15 fight for a living wage. 80% of the people that responded to the survey responded that, yes, we believe there should be a $15 minimum wage floor in this country. Less than 20% of the people that responded said, I am willing to pay more on a daily basis to support that, right? And so there's a massive disconnect between what we want and what we're willing to pay for. And so when we're out there competing with other businesses that aren't following the same practices as ours, it does make it more difficult because we have to find ways within our model to support the things that we're doing without charging more for it. We serve on average 625 people a day in our restaurants. That's over 225,000 people per year across our entire 20 restaurants that we operate right now. It's 4.5 million guest visits a year. There's a significant portion of those people that really don't come to Snooze because we compost, right? They come to Snooze because the pancakes are amazing, the people are fantastic and friendly, and the ambiance has great energy. If we raise our prices substantially to cover the cost of all the inputs that we would need to get to what our longer term goals are in terms of 100% responsible sourcing and zero landfill waste, we might put ourselves out of business. And so we have to be really careful in how we balance those things because, from our perspective, we composted 1.4 million pounds of organic material in 2016, which is remarkable. And so if we weren't in business doing that, those guest visits would go to another restaurant that was sending that directly to a landfill. So we try to keep that top of mind when we think about how we balance how far we are on our journey into sustainability, along with being a profitable, sustainable business.
So how often do customers, I know you're on the financial side, so more back end, but
yeah.
How often do you hear about customers, saying like, wow, I heard you guys locally source or you compost and we love that?
It's interesting because we actually have relatively low frequency when compared to other competitors out in the industry. Part of that is because our weights are absurd. So we put up smart. we put up a barrier to use, and so people come to Snooze less frequently than they go to other places. And there are, however, a core of people who visit Snooze frequently. They come early, they come in off times, they figure out how to use us, and they come a lot. And those types of people tend to know what Snooze is about, and they know that we compost, that we recycle, that we divert 90% of all of the waste from our restaurants away from landfills. And that matters to them. However, there's still a substantial portion of our guests that find us on Yelp that have never been to Snooze before, that might be visiting in Denver from out of town, and it's an amazing brunch place with great pancakes and Bloody Marys, and that's what they're there for, and they don't know a thing about our sustainability mission. So it's definitely a pretty large mix between those.
And do you communicate that mission? Because I had no idea.
neither.
I saw you on that, and I was like,
I
seriously?
actually perceived you as an elite place, and you guys should do a whole marketing thing based on that.
It's
That's
probably
amazing.
our biggest shortcoming right now is just how we communicate this to the public, and we try to be very careful with this because we don't want to be preachy about it. You know, again, there's a lot of people that are coming to
You
Snooze.
should. There's no time.
I'll be preaching on your behalf.
It's time
Don't
for
worry about
preaching.
it.
We do stuff on the back of the menu, and we talk about the things that we do on the back of the menu. There's a story. Not everyone flips the menu over and reads that. We talk about it a lot on our website, so if you go to our website, there's a lot of information there. The ways we're trying to explore getting this message out more without just overtly hitting people over the head with it when they come in, and having our servers walk up to them and say, like, did you know we divert 90% of our waste from landfills? Like, most people just aren't going to connect with that, and they don't want that to be part of their experience.
And most people
so,
don't think they don't
I
realize the
would.
importance of that.
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah.
I would come back. You
Well,
would have
yeah.
me for good. And if you bet at people like me, you would
Yeah.
have an incredible audience.
So we're exploring different platforms through which we can leverage our weight. And so when you come to Snooze, you put your name on the list, we take your cell phone number and we text you and say, you know, hey, thanks for putting your name on the list. We'll text you when your table is ready. We're working with a company right now where we would also then be able to text follow-up links to say, hey, and by the way, check this out. And it might be videos of a farm visit that we're doing, videos that relate directly to a lot of our sustainability missions. And, you know, we have green captains in all of our restaurant that are committed to advancing the sustainability goals of the restaurant, and also education within the restaurant and amongst our staff. And those folks actually go on trips to landfills, to compost facilities, to recycling facilities around the cities that we operate in. And so, you know, we take video, we take pictures, we tell stories around some of that stuff, but we do a poor job of telling it. And so we're pretty actively working on how we tell these stories and give people the opportunity to opt into learning about it, as opposed to pushing it on them and forcing it to be a part of their experience.
Yeah, this is definitely difficult because people are just hungry, you know?
Yeah.
I found out about all...
Especially after waiting 2 hours.
Yeah, right? You guys just deal with hangry people all
Yeah.
day. Yeah, I found out about your guys' initiatives through one of the cards you had on the table, and it talked about where you got the coffee, and then I'm naturally curious about anything sustainability related, so then I searched the menu and I was like, oh, and there was some more stuff, and then I went online, obviously. But there is a very light amount of content currently.
It's light.
But it sounds like you guys are working to kind of beef that up. So that's awesome.